Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Struggle Vision Pineapples, and I'm here with my friend.
Crescent Novaspec.
And today we have a fantastic surprise. With us is Jesse Merlin.
Jesse Merlin is the voice of Fang in Street Fighter V, and he is here in the studio with us today.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here. 2 minutes. You'll be disappointed and tired of me within 2 minutes. I promise.
Much like how the Street Fighter community was whenever Fang was revealed.
That was tough. Yeah, that was a tough reveal.
Well, Jesse, we're very happy for you to be on the show with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, how did you get started working with Capcom? What's your history like?
Oh, sure. Well, that's a big question. You know, I've been a professional musician and actor for about 20 years, my whole adult life, and I spent most of my 20s as a full-time opera singer. So much of my resume is working in foreign languages and without a microphone at all, working in live concert venues. And I came to musical theater and straight acting a little bit later, mostly in my 30s, and I'd always, I grew up on video games. I loved them. I've told Axel a little bit about this. I was, I think my first PC, though we wouldn't have called it a PC at the time, was like an Apple II Plus, and I was taking that thing apart and playing, all right, this is going to take four floppy drives. Let's load it into our 64K of RAM and get it started. And so
those little story games, like on floppy disks.
Well, some of them were full graphical games. They were fiendishly hard. And it's funny. I told Axel too. I still play my Atari Lynx, and I got a little thing for it, and I'm actually able to play a lot of my Apple II Plus games on my Atari Lynx, which is kind of amazing that I'm actually looking that far back. But yeah, no, I was a Nintendo
really
kid.
Cool.
Yeah, I was a Nintendo kid. My dad had the Jaguar and the Lynx, so we had Ataris around, but I grew up on the NES, and then eventually graduated onto other things and kind of outgrew gaming, but then rediscovered it later. You know, but in terms of coming to it professionally, this was just a random thing. I had auditioned. I wish it were a bigger part of my resume. I don't do a lot of it. I would certainly like to do more. I've auditioned for many years. My first gig in that sphere was a couple of dubbing characters for Hellsing Ultimate. I came in when they
Wait,
were,
what?
Yeah, I did.
Wait.
And that's how I kind of found my way to Street Fighter V. So yeah, no, bit characters. You can see it's on my Instagram. It's like I did a bit character in Hellsing 9 and 10. I think my bigger character
Wait,
was...
which
What?
character did you do?
Which character did you do?
It's a small one. This was years before Fang. His name is Makube. He's kind of the guy that takes over the big Vatican organization in the aftermath. So he's kind of this, overdone Italian kind of cassock wearing character.
My god!
Right
dude,
at the end,
wait,
I'm only on
what?
screen for a couple minutes, but
Yeah, but that's still so sick. Hellsing Ultimate's my jam.
Oh, yeah, it's a great show.
I love Hellsing.
That's crazy.
That's
well,
crazy.
yeah, it's funny because it took a long time. I think it took over 10 years to do all the dubbing, so we were only dubbing those episodes in 2012. But I keep hoping they'll make more because that character definitely feels like he's set up to come back if the story continues.
I know. Hopefully there'll be a revival, if anything.
Yeah,
Hellsing Ultimate itself was a revival of the original.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I know it's a really popular franchise, and I work a lot in horror. I'm sure we'll talk about that too. My main kind of bread and butter as an actor is low-budget horror movies. Horror musicals is kind of my niche. I've been decapitated 200 times all over the world in a show called Reanimator the Musical that I did with Stuart Gordon, the filmmaker of Reanimator, and the original effects team. And I played the bad guy, Dr. Hill, in that. So that's kind of my jam. But yeah, so I did Hellsing, and that was...
Did you just...
Sorry?
Did you just say you worked with the director for Reanimator?
That's what I've done for almost 10 years now. Stuart Gordon is a really close friend of mine, and I auditioned. I played.
What?
Yeah, I played Dr. Hill in Reanimator the Musical, so I got decapitated on stage.
Oh my god, dude! I'm a horror movie junkie.
Oh, awesome.
Pineapple's way more experience in this than I am.
Reanimator is such a... Oh my god, do you guys use the theme too?
Well, it was excerpted in the opening, but even the theme, which is wonderful. Richard Band is a great composer. Even the theme is kind of a riff on Psycho by Bernard Herrmann. So
he admitted it too.
Oh,
He was
he's
not
hiding
shy
it.
about it.
No. It's it was all original music and songs. So it was this wonderful composer named Mark Nutter who Stuart had worked with in his theater days. Because before, I mean, Stuart had already had almost a 20-year career as a professional enfant terrible and experimental theater maker and avant-gardist before he made Reanimator. I mean, he had this amazing body of work in theater. So when we come back, when he was like developing it for the stage, and we do all the stunts from the movie, you know, I got decapitated on stage and I had to carry my severed head around while singing in this whole like contraption. Yeah, you can see all the pictures are on my Instagram and even some clips. But the thing is, yeah, no, but the thing is, what's heartbreaking is we made the cast album 4 years ago. It's just not out yet because, I mean, we are trying to develop it for a bunch of different things, including a feature, which I think would be really interesting. So yeah, so that's kind of been my other racket. But no, to come back to your first question, so I did Hellsing, and I just auditioned for it. It was just one of many, you know, email auditions, but I did book it just for a little bit of pickup work near the end of the episode, and it was directed by an old friend of mine, actually, who probably referred me for the audition in the first place, Taliesin Jaffe, who you may know from Critical Role. He's also a really famous voice actor and director in his own right. He's got a resume many would envy. So he's a superstar from the Critical Role Twitch series, and I mean they're selling out football stadiums for basically a bunch of people to get together and watch a group of celebrities play. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know about Critical Role?
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, right. But they're all voice actors, right?
Matt Mercer.
Exactly, Matt's the DM, and isn't the gal who plays a lead in Street Fighter V? Isn't she one of the leads in it too? I mean, like, so there is a Street Fighter connection. I forget which.
I haven't kept up with the most recent season. I know they shifted seats around the time I stopped watching. Because I lost track of time. I used to watch it a lot because I'm also a D&D. You'll find that I'm a man of like many hobbies.
Awesome.
And so one of them is D&D. I collect RPG books. Right outside this room, I've got a bookshelf just ladled with different tabletop systems. Roll20, GURPS, Reese, Starfinder.
Oh, that's so cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I used to watch it.
We definitely share that. I would love to. I've kind of rediscovered tabletop in the last few years. I'm in love with the 1979 Dune game from Avalon Hill, which just got reissued after almost 30 years, and now people are playing it again. But like forever, it was impossible to get the game. And so I love all that. So Taliesin he's an incredible colleague and person. You know, he's just I think we probably met socially from the nightclubs or the Rocky Horror scene, or I don't know, probably just around town here in LA. So I auditioned. He was voice directing that, and we just worked together, and it was quick. You know, it's like when you're doing small characters. I don't think I was in the booth for more than an hour. But the producer on that was Jonathan Klein, and so he was also in the booth watching Taliesin direct me and work with me in front of the microphone, and and so Jonathan remembered me, and I guess about 3 years later, when he was casting for Street Fighter V, he invited me to audition. Now I've done some email auditions before then. I don't know because I didn't book anything, but I remember the Street Fighter auditions, which I think was probably early 2015. It was definitely a new thing for me because not that often do you go in and like sign NDA paperwork. I mean, you sign NDA paperwork all the time, but usually they email.
But just right off the bat.
Yeah, like even before they'll email you, sides to read an audition. But no, I needed to go in the office. I was not emailed anything. I didn't know what the project was. I didn't know anything about it. And it was very serious and it was a high level of secrecy, so I knew it was something important. Now, if I'd been a little bit savvier about video games like you guys, I probably would have recognized it as Street Fighter right away, because basically for the audition, what I got was a sheet that had a picture, like an early sketch design of something close to what the character ended up being, but not enough so where you'd like, I mean, I don't even think they were casting Bison and Ryu, but if there was like an identifiable character, they would have tweaked it enough so you wouldn't necessarily immediately know who it was. So I read a bunch of those, and he was very genial about it. I mean, I was just sitting in his office in front of a microphone and going through a stack of papers, and there was probably at least 10 characters for men, or however many they were auditioning at that time. And he's like, you read for as many as you want, and I read for most of them. And then, like most of these auditions, even the memorable ones, the first thing you do when you leave the office is try and forget about it, because it's when you get close to something is when it is most devastating when you don't get it, right? So you just forget about it. And then I don't know how long, I'd say weeks later. I mean, it was a decent span had elapsed. I got a happy email from Jonathan telling me that I had been cast, and I was thrilled, and it was one of the main roles in the game, and of course I was elated. I mean, I didn't really know any details, but it didn't matter. You know, I played Street Fighter as a kid. It was a big deal to me it still is a big deal to me to be involved with something that's such a high profile franchise. So yeah, I just got the email offering me work, and then I think might have been a second email following up saying, "Oh, by the way, you're going to be doing the role of Rashid. We'll send you more stuff about that later." And it's like, oh,
wait, what?
Yeah, and then I said, oh, okay, fine, super. I'll just wait for details. And so I went back and I was trying to remember Rashid. Who is this Rashid character? Was he okay? I remembered a little bit of some of like the spec. I mean, we didn't get too much of the details, but they wanted to. I certainly hear like catchphrases and key lines. And then I think a couple days later, I got an email saying, "Oh yeah, no, never mind, not Rashid. It's this character named Fang. We'll tell you more about him later." So I think at some point there must have been a crossed wire, and they just offered the wrong roles to people. I don't know if the same thing happened to the actor who actually got Rashid. But you know, F.A.N.G, I couldn't have been more delighted to get that particular character, regardless of how people may feel about him. In terms of his fighting abilities, I mean, it's just like a grandiose purple megalomaniac killer. I mean, sign me up. These are all things that I identify with. Not so much that I'm, a megalomaniac killer, but I like villains, and I like the really over the top and purple. Yes, of course, aesthetic. I'm a purple guy. Yes, no, it's like if I had just looked visually at the characters that were on offer, I would have picked him to play. And so I appreciate that about you, Axel, that you felt a kinship with him right away, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is my guy.
Much to the chagrin of like half the other rest of the Street Fighter community, who absolutely hated his reveal. Mostly because I don't know how familiar you are with Street Fighter history, but the boss characters in the game, there was 4 of them from the beginning of time that Street Fighter came out, and F.A.N.G essentially took the spot of one of those characters.
Balrog, right?
No, that was Sagat.
Oh.
Sagat at the beginning, because Balrog, Vega, and Bison were in the game by the time story mode was out, which was the main part.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no.
Did Sagat is in the game now? Hasn't he come in or?
Yeah, now.
Oh, yeah, it's like 2 years later.
Right.
So it was
people
just
were mad,
more.
Of course. So yeah, I'm sure that I didn't have a chance. I'm sure they were mad about that, plus a lot of other things. It's like.
Yeah, more just like, oh, this is the last character, this big joke-looking, purple, weird-looking, skinny character. Like, people were not expecting him, and it was an actual complete curveball for him to be the final reveal. I don't know if you are, like, completely aware of this, but audio of F.A.N.G actually did get leaked.
Oh, yes, I was laughing about that, because I downloaded it and listened to it, because, they watch... I mean, like any project, it's not unique to Capcom. Once you're on board with something high profile, just expect that everybody's watching your social media. So just don't talk about things. I don't talk, I was under NDA a long time before I could mention anything about it. Yeah, but I was able to at least listen to sound clips of it and see how people were reacting,
Mm-hmm.
That must have been a awakening to be like, oh, it's me. I wonder how people, ooh.
You know what I had to do? Because I'm pretty sensitive, and I'll put it this way. Maybe not the best line of work for that reason. Like, opera critics are the meanest SOBs on the planet. I mean, it's just like because I worked so long in opera where they're not just criticizing your voice or your technique or your performance, they're criticizing you and they get really personal and really nasty. So in a sense, that steeled me for negative criticism, but at the same point, it's just like. Fans are a different kettle of fish. We're talking about multitudes of people who have a deeply invested emotional, what feels like an ownership stake in a franchise that may be older than they are, or that they've been playing since they were really small. So I totally get that people have strong feelings about it. I guess when you're the final character in a long set of reveals, it almost sets you up for failure. Like, unless you're something, colossal, people are going to be disappointed. But I did, I watched one of the major reveal videos, and the guy was so negative that I just had to unplug from it. It's like, it's like, oh, you know what? I better just let this settle and see how people respond once they've had a chance to actually play him. And then again, remember, it was a long time after the game streeted. I don't even remember how long it was before cinematic story mode came out. I think it was a few months, right? I mean, it was.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because the cinematic story mode didn't come out with the release. It came out sometime later with an extra patch.
It was season 2 because Balrog, Guile, and all those characters were all in the story.
Right. So my question becomes, did you guys pre-record the cinematic story mode, or did they call you back for that?
Oh, no.
Like, was that done during the first round of recordings?
It was all that. I was probably doing cinematic story stuff from maybe my first day. Yeah, it was all done in the original recording block, and that was. I mean, I'm sure it was frustrating for fans whenever something that feels not entirely complete goes out. Because I know that's not totally unique in video games, but I know that was part of the challenge of the rollout.
With Street Fighter V's case, it was way more than some other games,
right.
But that's a whole nother can of worms.
That loops into a complaint about the current structure of like game releases in general, especially with the age of like digital downloads, digital not production, distribution, like Steam and whatnot, and the ability to kind of push out a product and then just patch it later. Games have gotten a bit more lenient with their release structure,
right?
But Street Fighter V was a whole new animal. Like the beta was what we were expecting to be a test, and then the release was very similar to the containment of the beta, and that's a bad sign. And so it took them up to now. Now the game's in a fantastic state to get to a point where it's like, this is a completed game. This is fully fleshed out. This is what I want from a fighting game in what is supposedly the last year of its run. Mm-hmm. So like, that's a whole nother.
It is, and animal. I do have feelings and thoughts about it. I don't want to get into it. We can talk offline about it at some point because obviously this is something people have strong feelings about, and I really just want to focus on my own work in the game. But I do recognize that was part of the story. No, and the only reason I mentioned it is because it was a long time before cinematic story mode came out, and that's the bulk of my work in the game. I mean. Of course, I was never in the studio with another actor. I did it all on my own, which is just the way these things are recorded generally. But, what was so interesting about the cinematic story mode is the vast majority of the bulk of Fang's character is all in the mode. It's a starring role. It's 2.5 hours of content. I mean, I'm still proud of it. I mean, for whatever complaints people may have with the rollout or with details of it, I think it's a pretty amazing accomplishment, particularly on the design and team and the people who rendered it. And I think some of the voice work is great, but it's just like, I was obviously impatient to see that come out. And when I was able to watch it and stagger my way through as a player, because I really don't know how to play the game very well, I was satisfied with how well it did come off, and satisfied also. Like many performers, I'm highly self-critical. It's not very easy for me to watch my work. At most work I do in terms of movies or small TV show appearances, anything where I'm on camera, I will usually watch it once and maybe a second time if I need to review it for a technical reason. But usually once is all I can handle, and then I just don't want to see it again. So I was at least sad, which is just it's one of these emotional things. It's like it's not, for a lot of people, I mean, it is instructive and you do need to examine your own work. For me, though, it's not pleasant. But I was happy. I do have to say, I was pretty happy with the way F.A.N.G came out in cinematic story mode. I didn't realize he was going to end up being such a, the central bad guy. But it was all recorded out of order and disjointed, and I never read a script, so I never really felt that I understood even fully the arc of what I was playing. You in those situations when you're doing things in a disjointed manner, you really have to trust your voice director. And again, this was Jonathan Klein, who had produced me. He runs New Generation Pictures and has worked a lot with Capcom. Just a fine producer and director and a really great colleague. But you have to trust the person in the booth to know that they're the one mastering the script and knowing that you're hitting all of your points and in service to the larger story that you don't actually even know yourself.
Absolutely, and Street Fighter Story Mode was a big leap for the series. They never did anything that really focused on the background or interactions of these characters outside of 1v1 fighting.
Yeah, it was huge.
Right. And I know also it was a while before the full arcade mode came along, but now people are as much as they can be in the community satisfied with it. I mean, like, arcade mode is complete. Mm-hmm. It's a big, that was another step forward, I think.
Oh yeah, people are a lot more satisfied with the game now than they were months ago.
Oh,
Essentially,
that's good.
this last recent patch of like tying the game with the bow really finished it off. And actually, I kind of wanted to ask you, like, you already had like voices and lines and dialogue throughout the whole cinematic story mode. What was it like having to voice actions and special moves, getting hit, throwing punches? Because I know there's all different types of like grunts and groans that go into voicing a character. What's that process like?
Right. Well, it's I don't, without getting too into the weeds, it's a technical thing, and different kinds of actors will approach it differently based on your background. I approach my work, I think, differently, certainly than most voice actors, and I think just differently than quote unquote straight actors in general, because my background, even though I did go to NYU to study acting and I love acting and I'm passionate about it, my main focus for many years was music. So whatever I approach, even just a set of text, of any kind of text, I approach it the same way I approach a piece of music. It has rise and fall, it has shape and line, it has cadence. And in a very real sense, like just like music, the most important pieces of text are often in the silence. They're in not the notes, but in the space in between the notes. So even with something like 2 minutes, I'll finish you in 2 minutes. That's like a roller coaster of different pitches I'm hitting on the way up and down. And that's just one example because that particular one is very sing song and very kind of all over the map. But the same thing, when you're doing battle sounds, I remember my first session was just 4 hours, and we were only doing 4 hour sessions. Which, when you're doing throat ripper work, that's a lot, and that's really about the most you can safely do, and you never 2 days in a row. But I remember my first day, it was just like a couple hours of throat ripping. It was just like I mean, it was just one battle sound after the next. And light damage, medium damage, hard damage, attack, defending. I mean, so all of these different things, and all these different like nuances to just generic battle sounds, and layer that on top of the fact that I'm trying to also match the flap of a character that probably hasn't even been fully rendered and animated yet, and I'm also going based on what Mr. Chiba has already recorded, because by the time I recorded, I'm pretty sure most of the Japanese voice actors had already completed their work, or at least done enough of it to get ahead of us, so we could model, in a sense, model our own performances and work on the existing Japanese voice actor tracks. But it's different when it's nonverbal. When you're just matching, you still have to match. It needs to go up and then down, or it needs to go down and then up and then down again. Like whatever the kind of sine wave shape of the line is, they usually want you to match what the other actor has done first. And also, they're really specific about the length of the hit. But that's some of the most physically and vocally demanding work that you're going to do in this kind of game, and it's very easy to blow your voice out, even in the first hour. So it becomes kind of a mental challenge of how do I do this? How do I do this in a way I can consistently deliver a result I'm happy with over the next couple hours without damaging my voice so I can't work at the end of this 4 hour session? And so that was my introduction to the character. It was like, okay, you wanted to do this, you wanted this job, here you go. Here's a few pages, and I'm only seeing one line at a time, so I'm not even mentally pacing myself. I'm kind of scrolling through a spreadsheet, and I'm not reading it in advance. I have really no idea what's coming, but you do trust the person in the booth who's there with you, Jonathan Klein, and also his partner, and then someone else I'll mention later. But to know that you are pacing yourself and doing it the right way. So a lot of that is just being able to do a reproducible and consistent gesture without damaging yourself. And you also get in the hang, ideally, of as much as possible hitting it your first take or your second take. You really don't want to go more than that. If you have to do 3 takes, it's because something isn't working, and then you start to bog down. But it was fun. It was, you're basically standing in this booth, and I don't know what it is. I think for different kinds of recording it might be different, but since it's such a physical thing doing these fighting game characters, I don't think there was ever a chair in the booth. I think we did the entire thing standing the whole time. I think there might have been a chair to the side where I could sit down if I needed a break, but the whole time we were working, we were standing. So you're just standing in front of a music stand with a tablet or like a screen on it that you're not even controlling, and they're just kind of scrolling through the tablet or scrolling through the spreadsheet and showing you one line at a time. Here's what the text is, here's the description of the line, here's the literal translation, and sometimes we have to change that. I did want to mention, because I enjoyed working with him, and I haven't seen him since. And God, it's hard to believe this is 5 years ago. It was 2015 we were recording this. I don't remember how many times he was there, but at least 2 or 3 times, also with Jonathan and his partner in the booth, was Peter Rosas. And you know Peter, right? Do you know who I'm talking about? He's
Combo Fiend in the FGC.
Yeah, Combo Fiend, right. So he's this well-respected, serious, pro-level player who's also kind of a bridge from the FGC to the professional world and to Capcom, right? So he represents a lot of different interests, and I think people do respect him. And I mean, this is just I'm saying this as someone who doesn't know him very well, but like I got that feeling like having him there in the booth and kind of working with Jonathan as the game was developing, I felt like in that sense, and certainly not in a way that I could directly experience, but I felt like the player's voice and the fans' voice and the larger FGC voice was being represented by having him there. So I'm not sure if other actors... Yeah, I'm not sure how much the other actors have talked about that, but I liked having them there, because honestly, sometimes he had really interesting, suggestions and it's kind of a surreal experience. I mean, like I say, I don't even remember how many sessions it was. I think maybe 6 sessions. And we basically completed it. We'd completed everything, and then I think it was about a week later, I got an urgent phone call from Jonathan. It's like, "Where are you? Can you come over right now? We have to knock this out." And that was my very last time. I showed up one last time just to record the trailer vocal for the character reveal. Uh-huh. So I think pretty sure that was the very last thing I did on the project.
Mm-hmm. Fang was such a unique character already. Like, I'm glad that he made such the impact that he did. He's grown something of a cult following. I've met with a lot of FANG players over my tournament experience, and we just automatically connect through our love of the character and just our ability to play goofy and however we want with him. And every FANG player that I've met in my life has just been really cool to talk to and just interact with in tournament and competitive settings.
I'm delighted to hear that. Really, and I mean, not that it would offend me, but do you find most of them are playing in English, or are they also listening to the Japanese characters?
It's a mix and match, because in official Capcom tournaments, all the voices are automatically set to English, but I like both yours and Mr. Chiba's performance of FANG, because you embody the very more flamboyant, expressive side of FANG, where Mr. Chiba, I think, really holds the insanity, the poison, the sadistic side of FANG. He sounds much more just crazy off the walls, but you give the character much more sophistication and just class to him, and that's just the variety the character brings. He may be hated, but there's so much fan art, there's so much love, there's so much just the people who do love FANG really, really like FANG, so it's crazy.
Yeah. And that goes a long way with me. I mean, I've met, not just chatting with you online, but I've met some really lovely folks. This gal, I think in Mexico City, who's a FANG cosplayer, and she's really, and loves it. And of course, there's a lot of fans who do the fan-themed art. I was delighted to see, I don't know if it was at one of the big FGC events a few years ago, there was a FANG cosplayer there who was dancing around during the big competitive matches. And
oh yes, that was at the first Evo.
Right, and he kind of stole the show, because it's just well, who wants to watch what's happening on stage? This guy's hilarious, It's no, I haven't met him, but I'm delighted that, and I'm also a champion of underdogs generally, just in entertainment and characters. I mean, I don't know if either of y'all are classic Doctor Who fans, but I absolutely love the Sixth Doctor, and I love classic Doctor Who in general. I mean, and the most pilloried and looked down upon stories and characters are often my favorites. So
FANG definitely classifies an underdog. That's a character that no one ever really expected to see succeed. So it's always fun to see them do well in tournament. I do want to ask you though.
Sure.
We've talked a lot now about the process in the booth and what all the things that you brought together to make the character what it was. Do you feel that your background in opera, especially, and theater in general, really kind of helped you in the booth, or was this a brand new animal to tackle whenever you do gaming dubs or even anime dubs or whatever you do?
I will say, I mean, I don't... People are struggling right now. The last thing I want this is to become a litany of woe. It was a really cool job, and I was happy to do it. But of course, when you break into, or you feel like you break broken into something new, on some level you're hoping you're going to stay there, and that doesn't happen for everybody. I've only done one other game role since then. I did Impact Man in Mega Man 11, which was another really fun character, but much smaller than F.A.N.G. I mean, it was a much smaller role.
Right.
Did it serve me? It just, like I said, I had a different technical approach to it. Is it better or worse? I don't have the perspective to offer an opinion, but I would just say it is a different approach, and that's kind of makes for a different result. I mean, I'm glad that you see it that way too, Axel, but like with Mr. Chiba's performance was so different than mine, and he completed it, at least from my point of view, first. And so a lot of what I was doing was matching vocally in the process of transliteration, where you're going from a completely different language from one to another at the same point, trying to hit the exact same length and the shape and the rise and the fall and kind of the scansion and some of the syllabic jumps needed to match.
And you said that you only had like a little bit of concept art to go off of visually, correct?
I mean, I don't remember what I saw from the audition. Yeah, no, that's true though. My first day, all they showed me for F.A.N.G. They played me my own audition because it's just like, okay, we cast you because of this, so remember this because we want you to do something roughly like this. So they played me my audition so I could remember what I sounded like. And then I just went into the booth, the director's booth, and they showed me, I don't even think it was 15 seconds, they showed me a little bit of F.A.N.G. on the fighting room floor, some brief bit of animation, him doing something, not even a critical art, just to show me that he's kind of like a little bit of a bird-like character, flaps his arms, is flamboyant, and he's purple. And that's really all I remember, and I think it was probably pretty early on. So all of this is just coming out of your mind, and a lot of it is just what you bring to it. Now, whether or not what it coming from theater or opera helps, it's I would hope so. I mean, particularly with opera, it's like one of the interesting things working all those years in opera and then coming later and working in front of a camera is I had to almost unlearn everything, because almost everything I do to play a 2,000-seat house without a microphone is going to be too big in front of a camera, let alone in front of even a 100-seat theater, where some of my interesting career moments have been in really small theaters. Well, back of the house, big house, histrionic acting doesn't necessarily fit in the same way. But it builds you a physical technique so you can get through something difficult like 4 hours of screaming battle sounds in a manner where you're not actually going to be coughing out blood by the end. I don't know. Okay. That's interesting. It
was new but similar.
I would like to. I certainly would like to do more of it. I find it an interesting challenge. The people who specialize in it and do it all the time, I have great respect for it, because it is a highly specialized skill, and I don't think folks necessarily realize how much goes into delivering a performance like that. Just in terms of everything that you have to bring along with you by the time you're in the booth once you've actually gotten the job. It's like Jonathan, the director I mentioned, he has a great line when people ask him about how do I get into voice acting. And he's just like, well, when you say I want to be a voice actor, you just take out the word voice and say I want to be an actor. You kind of need to be an actor first. Specializing in voice is a noble specialization to pursue, like any kind of specialization, but you still have to understand intention, action, reaction, emotional life, truthfulness. I mean, a lot of the basic nuts and bolts work you do as an actor in classes, in college, on stage, in community theater, in musical theater, like we all kind of start in the same way, and it's a question of are you able to build yourself a framework that will serve you in other ways? It's funny. Some of my, not even in video games, but some of my more significant breaks have just come from having this. I kind of jokingly call it my opera superpower. It's like, it's not a great superpower, but it is a superpower. I just don't get to use it that often. It's like you're always hoping, if you're the character who's got the superpower, it's like, I'm going to get to use this in Act 3. Someone's going to really need this, and then I'm going to save the story, But until then, you're just kind of being the irritating one that everyone's expecting to get killed. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. No,
it does. And I'm glad you brought it up the way you did, because I did acting for, throughout college. I also did musical theater. Not that I can sing worth a darn, but recently I started, because I've always wanted to be a voice actor and do dubbing. And so I started doing some side projects, and I would I would just keep an eye for people just looking for, not for money, but just people looking for voices to throw my hand in there. And one thing that I've noticed, and even outside of voice acting, but like for streaming and for content creation, because I'm also streaming, I'm doing this podcast, is that I find that speaking to people is not as simple as just saying words. There's a lot of, because you don't have the visual element, which is a very strong part of communication, the ability to kind of visualize how you want the words to sound as if you were acting for them and delivering it to them in that fashion makes it so you hit the mark a lot more consistently. And so it's really cool to hear a professional say that, yeah, like voice acting is great, having accents and having like characters, one thing, but the ability to really express what you are trying to visualize in a non-visual element is just so core to the ability to do this well. And so it's really cool.
That's a really good point you make. And it's interesting, even to this day, I don't think I've met most of the Street Fighter V voice actors. I've met a bunch of them kind of casually and socially. But most of the folks I played my scenes with, I never met. We were never in the studio together. And I don't even know that I was ever even played clips from other performances I besides Mr. Chiba. I don't think so. So you just got to trust that what you're doing is right, because you don't even have the other half of, like when you're doing a radio drama or something, ideally, though I imagine that's probably rare too, ideally for some of these kind of recordings you can be in the booth with a group of people and then you're playing off of other people and you're doing it in a collective manner. It's much colder and more isolated when it's just you. You just really have to trust the choices you're making and trust the editors and the producers to put it together in a coherent manner. But that's outside of your hands. That's one of those things that's like kind of like the audience response, totally outside your hands. Like you do the best job you know how to do and hope it all comes together and that people, aren't coming after you with pitchforks.
That's another thing that's really cool. You mentioned that you're isolated in the booth. There's a group called Real-Time Fan Dubs, and very recently they've gotten a lot of popularity by doing real-time fan dubs of the Sonic the Hedgehog games, all of which were notoriously bad stories. But they all sit together in like a call at the same time and watch the cinematic and voice it over as it happens. And it's subtle, but there's a difference in feeling with the way that they approach the voice acting that they do, because they don't just read it, they do voice acting in that situation. And so the ability to see and hear the person that they're engaging with allows them to like be very dynamic with the way they do their characters and their jokes and whatnot. And so it's interesting to me that you saying that you're going in blind, that they don't even play you voice clips, because what that means is that you essentially have this image in your head in the way that like your character will be interacting in social environments, and you have no idea if that's accurate or not. Is that a fair statement?
The thing is, again, it goes back to the trust you have to have in your producer and director. I didn't finish the anecdote. My first day was a couple of at least 2 hours of solid battle sounds. I mean, they kind of threw me in the deep end to show you, like, a lot of what you're going to be doing this character is this, so let's make sure you can actually do it. And I got through it. And then at the end of that first session, we probably spent an hour or less doing my entire character introductory vocal. But they wanted I'm not sure if that was the reason behind it, but it's like you need to know how you're going to sound in battles, and also we want you to think about and approach how you're going to get into the character and his backstory and who he is. And we're still learning things about F.A.N.G. We don't know all that much about him, but like when I was just getting started, I didn't know a damn thing. And so at least getting that his story, his backstory with Bison and with the gang that he comes in from before he joins Shadaloo, that was interesting. So that was some of my very first work doing the actual narrative part of the character, was that speech. But I was going to mention also, it's interesting, you talk about the dynamism when you have multiple people. Ideally, you always want to have your actors together, but that's just not realistic. It's not the way most people can afford to do it. But when you have a visual component, it definitely does help. I certainly would like to do more of it, but over the last couple of years, I've been doing some foreign language dubbing into English for Netflix shows, because Netflix has decided that there's a huge amount of international content out there that has just not been available to an American audience because you couldn't get it, and because, I mean, let's be honest, 90% of people English speakers don't want to read subtitles. They're missing out, but hey, that's work for voice actors, so let's not get too huffy about it, right? So finally, they're taking a lot of these prestige shows and dubbing them, and that's fun too, because you're actually trying to get a voice that's matching a human being speaking in another language and making coherent sense of their choices while doing your own thing. So yeah, I did a few. I would love to do more. I did a character in Money Heist. I did Ad Vitam, this French one. It's not. I don't think it's even out yet.
Wait, who are you in Money Heist?
Oh, just I know the folks who produce and direct that. I was really hoping for a larger role in that. I'm in like one episode in the first season. I play some cellmate for one of the characters that again, it's on my Instagram. I get grilled by the lead woman detective. It's just kind of a.
Guess I gotta get Instagram, man.
yeah. No, it's like, look, I was late to that party too. So yeah, in Money Heist, Ad Vitam, and then the other one I did was. Gosh, is that one even out yet?
Are you about to break an NDA? Don't do
that.
No,
I'm not going to do that. No, it's but I would definitely love to do more of it. And so, Axel, I do want to ask you, because I've seen you've set up a booth in your closet and you've been doing stuff. How has your own process of getting started as a voice actor and doing voice work, how has that gone so far?
It's more just turned into this podcast, essentially, just getting something rolling, like just an actual project instead of just me recording lines and perfecting like one takes of speeches and stuff.
You had a closet booth?
Yeah, it's.
Was it like my closet booth?
Oh, that's what you do too.
That's why we have all the heavy coats.
Yeah, like whenever you're working with a laptop and poverty setups, that's what you gotta do.
Setup, baby. Man.
But no, it's been a struggle as well. Like, I'm sure it's been with you. I haven't been searching for work as much due to the coronavirus issue that's been happening, right. But I have been reading some books looking into just how to tune my voice. I actually have a unique stutter that people have like pointed out to me ever since I was like 5 or 6. I have uhs or at the end of my like questions or sentences. I'll just have like just a little
like a
trail off, yeah. So that's something I'm trying to correct more myself and just like get attuned. But I absolutely envy the struggle of voice actors and what they do. I know it's not an easy field to break into, and those who do, like, sometimes don't even see their work accredited as much or see much profit from it. So like it's something that you have to have a true drive and passion for.
And be a little bit unbalanced. I mean, it's just like I says, my old boss who discovered me in the opera had this wonderful line. She's like, I don't think you choose this career; it chooses you. Like, if you really have no choice, then you have to do it. But no, I identify with what you're saying, and I do want to say, speech correction. That's something. That's something best handled by and addressed by experts. What I would just want to say generally is, like, if you're able to reduce it in such a manner that you can turn it on and off, great. But even that, what you might look as, what might be seen in some sense as a characteristic defect, I wouldn't necessarily automatically take that. It's just another tool, and it's something you may be able to use. And the thing is, something I struggle against myself to kind of chafes. Just from my own experience and worldview, is like when people start giving you advice about flattening down your individuality and the things that make you who you are, and trying to make yourself more generic or more commercial or more castable, whatever it is. All of those things contain the implicit danger of erasing those things about you that make you interesting. The first manager for Humphrey Bogart gave him 2 pieces of advice. He told him to get rid of the lisp and change his name. Now, if he had done those things, we wouldn't be talking about him now. Like, if he had taken that terrible advice and effaced himself, he very likely could have vanished. But that's just one anecdote I try and bring out to remind people, like, the things, part of our brokenness or our uniqueness or our crooked nose or whatever the metaphor is, these are things that also can make us interesting. But
that's great advice.
But it's I know it's easy to say we're all looking to work, but it's like, especially if this is something you really want to try, you're also going to get an insane amount of well-intentioned but just completely off the wall bad advice. And and you're going to get assessments from people who just get you wrong or don't get you at all and don't recognize that you have anything to offer. Fred Astaire, his first screen test, the notes that came back and said, can't sing, can't act, can dance a little. And he ended up being one of the great talents of the century, right? But it's just like, don't, whatever the final prognosis is or whatever reasons people are giving you that for like this is standing in your way, listen to it, take it in, but don't necessarily believe it fully. Now, I'm not saying that something like stutter reduction or addressing any kind of speech pathology or any kind of characteristic. I mean, like a minor stutter, that's most Americans we're so lazy in our speech that most of us have never even studied speech or approached, even thinking about how we make consonants and vowels in our mouth and our throat and the resonators in our face and how it all works together. It's like this is outside of professionals and technicians. It's not even part of the conversation. So, but I will say, and I do mean this, you have an excellent natural voice. It is very appealing. It has a beautiful low timbre, and there's a lot you can do with it. But you can, that's the thing is like my voice may not be quite as low as yours, but I have a low voice, and I've made most of my career playing low-voiced bass range characters just because they fit my personality. And then look, the only major role I've gotten as a video game guy is F.A.N.G, and he's not really a very low-voiced character. He's very high-pitched and kind of all over the place. I mean, he's really, so it wasn't just that just happens to be an example of where my my natural voice wasn't necessarily what got me the job at all. It was what I brought to it. I would like to think.
The uniqueness.
Well, it's just like you maybe I really don't know. I'd be curious to hear some of the other auditions, but sometimes you bring them. Sometimes they're casting for an orange, and you bring them a pineapple, and they really didn't want a pineapple, but it's so crazy and weird. It's like maybe I need to consider if an orange is what I really wanted for this job. Or whatever. It's just like we come up with all these little intellectual sleight of hand to try and assuage our bruised egos when we don't get hired for a while, right? But yeah, and I did want to ask you too. We'd mentioned this earlier. How the current pandemic is affecting the FGC and how folks are getting together to play. I mean, conventions, let alone also local clubs and everything.
It's terrible.
It's
really the only way to put it. Like, regardless of how you want to weigh the actual threat or the nature of the coronavirus, the fact that multiple states have put themselves on caps for the number of people in a similar area, travel. While travel is cheaper now because the airlines are getting flushed, tournaments have been shutting down left and right. Pro tours have been canceling venues. The last chance qualifiers for the NRS scene was canceled day of. Like, it was day of, last minute. People were at the hotel, and it got canceled. And there was just nothing they could do about it. And these are last chance qualifiers being run by a big industry like NRS. Like, this is their pro scene. So, of course, these smaller scenes being run by these event organizers and people like you, me, Axel, who just love the community and want to give something back, they're feeling the brunt force of the coronavirus and its effect on people's ability to travel and to invest and partake in the community events.
The FGC was trying to get built to this point. We talked about how Street Fighter V came out in an early stage. It was to essentially seize the market of esports and get the ball rolling, which they did, and it's been rolling. And with everything getting canceled, we're about to see like how strong the community can hold on without being able to play offline and without the grassroots start that made the FGC what it is. And God, I lost my train of thought. What's crazy about the go on?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I know we're looking at a new generation of consoles coming in next year, but I suppose it is hopeful on some level. Who knows what the next thing will come along to be the next premier game for fighting games, but like let's hope they support Street Fighter V at least for the first year of the PS5, right? Let's hope that the game is still around at least that long because I mean, it is reverse scalable, right? They're going to let you play older platform games on it. I think I read that.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
And hopefully, and if the tour gets pushed back, maybe Capcom will consider running Street Fighter V another year.
Right.
And what I just realized, one thing that's crazy about this is that the Olympics was going to be holding Street Fighter V, and currently, right now, they're doing online preliminaries to get a handful of people to actually go to the Olympics. So if this continues on,
Street Fighter 5 is going to be the only Olympic event.
Yeah, if the Tokyo Olympics gets canceled, Street Fighter 5 is going to be the only game that was technically played for the Olympics in 2020.
I didn't hear this Tokyo story. I mean, as a competitive Olympic sport or as a side category?
No, it's going to be the first Olympic esport.
What it was supposed to happen, but
what it kills me is you make fun of me every time I bring this back up. But if only we had invested in decent net code. Like, I'm sorry, I don't make the news. I just say it. If we had decent net code, we would actually have options like the online qualifiers for the Arc System Revo tournament for Grand Blue, the Olympic preliminaries for Street Fighter V. We could actually have functional online tournaments. And you got to understand that the FGC has always been walking a thin line between survival and death, riding entirely on the ability for the community to come together to support the event makers and for the event makers to continue to make events that bring the community forward. Like, the FGC has always had problems, and I call it a problem, with attendance. Because especially now in the future, when you can just play online on your couch, why would I need to travel 20 minutes, 30 minutes, drop $300 for a flight to go to X state to play when I can play online, right? And so it's completely been on the events to give that drive, that unique feeling to warrant people to come out to their casuals, to their events and whatnot. And so with the virus shutting this down, like, this is not only one of the most catastrophic things that could happen to the in-person scene for the FGC, but this is in and of itself a perfect example as to why having functional online play is so important for the survivability of a game entirely around competition like this. If you can't make solid competition because people are afraid of getting sick, what do you have in the fighting game community?
We have nothing, and we've been trying to build this up for so long. It's actually going to come down to what we do with the online tools that we were given, how we keep it alive this way, because until something changes, we are going to be all stuck playing online. And people have been coming together to make community-run tournaments, make more content around the games, and just something to fill the void while tournaments are not going on. And how has it been affecting your work in LA with voice acting? I'm sure it's been insane.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit before we went online. It's a scary time for everybody, and I mean, I don't like I mentioned, I think the folks on the front lines of first responders, but particularly healthcare workers, retail folks, food service folks, these are the people who are facing this crisis and the panicked public harder than anybody, and those are the folks that really need our support and respect right now. But no, it's affected every industry, and perhaps few harder than entertainment, because it feels like almost everything has shut down pretty much overnight. I mean, my friends in classical music, I've just been seeing a Facebook feed full of people who lost, say, 6 months of work overnight. And there's no recourse for that. You're just screwed. I see so many people losing singing work as opera productions are canceled. All the theaters are closed. Most of the movie theaters are closed here in LA. Most of the big studios have stopped production altogether. So it's frightening in the sense it's like, shelter in place for 2 or however many weeks. Well, that's fine. Not everybody is able to do that. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad I ordered a whole bunch of books recently, and maybe I'll spend some more time playing my video games that I don't often get a chance to. Maybe I'll finally pull the trigger and get myself an Atari Jaguar, which I've been coveting for a while. But yeah, it's it's interesting to hear about it from the fighting game community point of view, because yeah, of course it's community is in the title. And that is one point of sadness for me. I am sad, and maybe I'll get to do it somewhere in the future. But I was hoping during the life of Street Fighter V as a game to at least get to do some kind of convention appearance. A lot of my friends have done some of those, and I still have yet to do that. I'm a nerd and a fan of my own fandoms, and so I do enjoy going to conventions occasionally, but I still, except for horror appearances, I rarely show up as a guest. And I would like to meet folks, certainly while the game is still being played, because this is a moment we've all shared, and it's, my God, it's been 5 years since we recorded it, almost 4 years since it came out. So that's these things have a natural lifespan. It's I'm delighted to be talking with you two today, while people still know who I am and who the character is and care about the game, because hopefully that will continue for a while, but there's no guarantee, these things come and go. But I'm delighted that it's made an impact. It was such a brief moment in my own career, and I own a copy of Street Fighter V. I gave away my first copy, or my first couple copies, and I own a copy, but I have completely forgotten how to do all of the special FANG stuff. I tried to reteach myself, and it's just
well, now it's time to relearn it.
Maybe now I'll have time. No, it's especially the really
we'll catch you online,
tier players who specialize in it. I appreciate that. Aren't there a few of the really high end competitors who have used FANG with some degree of success, just because, I don't know, maybe because people don't see him at a high level of play as often, so they're not as prepared?
Over the years, there have been more FANG players showing up and doing decently well in tournaments. The main FANG player at the beginning was a guy from Singapore named Shin, and he dropped the character after the first season of not doing too well with him, and he was expected to be like the main FANG player to watch and look out for.
I remember. So. Yeah, we chatted. We interacted on Twitter at one point, because he was a big FANG guy. And did Sonic Fox play it also for a while? I forget. There was.
Yeah. Sonic Fox is even kind of maybe getting back into it, but yeah, he definitely dabbled with FANG.
D Answer plays him. That's that D actually took Kumite in Texas, didn't he?
Yeah, he was second place.
No, second place. That's right. He lost to.
FANG's always the number 2 spot.
Always the number 2.
That's.
But he did well. He actually stood out to me more than the person who won, because he just had an amazing run, and his daughter running up. That was so cute. All right, well, it's been fantastic talking to you, Jesse. Thank you so much for your insight and everything you bring to the table with your experiences, not only working in voice acting, but just as a person. Is there anything you want to say to the audience?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure. Yes, since I'm not as up on these things, I should say I'm at Jesse_Merlin on Instagram, if you'd like to check out some of my other projects. I'm also just at Jesse Merlin, which is just at JESSEMERLIN on Twitter, though I don't use it that often. So yeah, most my new stuff and different projects I'm promoting are on and my horror movies are all on my Instagram. So thank you. I'm delighted to get a chance to know you guys. I'm looking forward to listening to this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Jesse, and hopefully our paths will cross again in the future.
Yes. Hopefully I'll get to meet you at one of these things once the dust settles and we're actually having adventure again.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the HomeGrown podcast. We hope you have enjoyed listening to our first ever interview. Hopefully more will be coming down the line.
Yeah, thanks you guys tuning in once again, and stay safe, wash your hands, get training. Now's the time. See you next time.